Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the British and Irish Eagles podcast, presented by Loch Lomond Whiskies and Pashank Avenue. And as you can tell, because I'm hosting this week, it's a losing podcast and Liam isn't here for this podcast. No, wait, no, joking. I am hosting this one, but Liam's decided to take a back seat this time because he's a busy old man as always, and he's off to Dublin. What did you say in the morning, Liam? So it'll probably end up with me and Tony finishing off, undoing all the bits that Liam's spoken about with Hurts later on. So that's what it feels like, boys. A gut-wrenching defeat to the Washington Commanders, quite unexpected. But before we get into that, Tony, welcome to the pod as well, joining me as well to keep getting me through this one. How are you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Finished up for my Christmas holidays today, so that's me off until a week on Friday, which all feels very good. Will inevitably be a day of Christmas dinner shopping tomorrow and present buying and all of these different types of things. But yeah, it feels like I've got a hangover today after that game tomorrow, but no doubt we'll get into it, fella.
Yep, exactly. There's a lot to get through, but sometimes I think the losing podcast can be quite cathartic, especially with how good we know that the Eagles are really, and how a one-off this game feels. So I'm quite looking forward to getting a few things off my chest, as I'm sure you are. But as I said, Liam is still joining us for a little while at least. Liam, like I said, off to Dublin tomorrow. Is that for Christmas, I presume, to see Mammy and a few other family members?
Yeah, I see 94-year-old Nanny O'Neill and my mother, Joan, if you're listening in, as well as the countless aunties, uncles, first cousins, second cousins that we'll be seeing over a 3-day period. Flying tomorrow, come back 27th. Then we've got a day at home. Then we're at my dad's for 2 days in Kenilworth. Then we've got a day at home. Then we're at Katie's dad's for 3 days. We've just been at Kate's mum's for 2 days. I think 12 days out of 15, we are either traveling or in someone else's house. I think I worked it out earlier on today. It's 2 flights, 4 train journeys, and 8 car journeys across 7 houses and 2 countries. So busy bee. Apologies, can't stay for the full thing, but I've done 0 packing. And we fly tomorrow. I tried to get some food in, do a little bit of research at the end, and join you boys for as much as I can. But looking forward to this podcast because I'm not hosting, and you've done a fantastic job, sir. I have to say, on 3 of the last 4 weeks of hosting in my absence, and I was back last week. So, well done.
Thank you. For a person who has a few reservations when traveling, you're certainly going to put yourself through it for the next few days. So make sure you look after yourself, mate, during that.
I know.
But yeah, so as for my Christmas preps, I'm at home with a heavily pregnant wife due any day now. In fact, we've got a date for the C-section, so that's going to be in just after the new year, unless she decides to make an arrival in between there, which is just as possible. So a quiet little Christmas, just dinner at home with my parents, and then settling down just to sort of play in the waiting game, watching hopefully as much sport as I possibly can.
Cooper Dean jersey I've seen there, Phil.
It is, yeah, 33.
Very nice. Not available in the pro shops.
Wasn't available in the pro shop, so I did source it through other means, and for the price it was, it's pretty good quality, and it's something that I can doss around the house in, and I'm not too worried about getting it damaged, which is actually quite a nice thing with jerseys, because when you spend $150 on one, you don't really want to get it dirty, scratched, hitched. If this one goes, I'll just order another one. It's like disposable, man. But anyway, that's enough Christmas cheer or plans. Let's get into this game, guys, because I need some angry words from you guys. I need you to get upset with me, because I go quite quiet when the defeat is when we lose a game or when the games aren't going that way. I tend to mute the chat because I just want to focus on going the game, and I need to come into this now and just hear you guys with your passionate off the fence takes and I'm looking forward to getting to them. But Tony, just overall, what are your overall thoughts on the game, and what is your biggest takeaway from the game going into the final 2 weeks?
Well, we're going to get into the bad, and my opening statement was going to be really covering off a lot of what we have in the bad, but surprisingly, it wasn't with regards to it being bad. It was regards to it being just a calamity of things that when I've done the post-mortem today and I've thought over the game and I've watched the game in 40 again, really what I take from it is I have no fear whatsoever of Washington coming to the link if they get the 7th seed and we down the 2. There is just a litany of things that tell me won't happen again, and as such, we've got nothing to fear when they come to the link in the wildcard round, which is looking more and more likely. I guess if I'm putting a positive spin on things, which I tend to want to do after a defeat, after a win, I tend to want to get into the nuts and bolts and what we could have done better and where we need to continuously improve. But I guess the kind of silver lining in the cloud is that we're now not chasing the 1 seed. So we could have been chasing the 1 seed right up to the end of the season, not taking any rest. It's been a long old time since we had the bye week. So for me, it's now forcing us into a position. We're pretty much locked into the 2. Either Washington needs to win out or we need to win a game. If we lose and Washington win, they get the NFC East, which isn't going to happen. I think no matter what happens against Dallas on Sunday, New York will be more desperate to lose than we're desperate to win in order to secure their draft pick. So I think what it does is it forces us to rest. It forces us to get healthy. As fans, it might be a bit frustrating for the next 2 weeks who we see on the field, but I'd sooner feel a bit of frustration knowing that we're going to go into the wildcard round fully fit, fully healthy at the link, and ready to go deep into the playoffs.
Yeah, I like that. Like I said, I was looking for some positivity. You make good points. I think there are definitely a few areas that are kind of being forced upon us that are actually positives rather than negatives, despite all the injuries and flags and everything that came in this game. I think looking ahead, it does make the next 2 weeks slightly more disappointing as fans, but from the team point of view, should be good in terms of game planning, preparation for the wild card round, as it does inevitably seem. And I think there's something like a 50% chance it's going to be the Washington Commanders. It's more unlikely to be anything else than anything. It would involve the Packers losing out and the Commanders somehow sneaking into the 6th spot with them, which I think is incredibly unlikely. So it looks like we're going to get our chance for revenge, boys. But Liam, the same sort of question. So what were your overall thoughts on the game and going into the next couple of weeks? Do you have anything different other than what Tony's spoken about so far?
Yeah, much of the same, to be honest. I agree with Tony. Although I tend to be positive whether we win or lose when I come onto this podcast. I think we're going to touch on a lot of the things in the bad section, so I won't go into too much detail. Pickett, if you want my elevator pitch summary snapshot, it would be Pickett shite. We can't rely on him to win a game of football. It would be, and that's compounded by the lack of respect the defensive coordinator of the Washington Commanders had for Pickett through the air. Meant that he just packed the box, which made Barkley pretty unusable in the second half. And that just shows you, like, having Jalen as your dual threat quarterback, it just allows Barkley to be so much better, as well as the offensive line. Pickett was below par. I know his stats aren't awful, and this kind of contradicts sometimes what I say about Hurts' stats being great, and but other people say not passing the eye test. For me, Pickett just didn't pass the eye test, and because our offense was so poor, it means our defense was on the field so much more. So, like, they made a few good stops early in the game with some good turnovers, but if you're going to give Jaden Daniel the ball that many times and not giving your defense a rest, then they're not going to be as impactful as they have been over the year season so far. The injuries were already frustrating. The refs were on some kind of mushroom, I presume, because the calls were atrocious. And I think we're one of the most penalised teams in the league. That's on Sirianni as well. He needs to coach the players better. We need to be more disciplined. And I think he came out and said that was on him as well in the one of the post game press conferences, which is what he does. He protects the players when these sorts of things happen. But for me, the biggest takeaway from this game, and I completely agree with Tony, I'm not worried about the Washington Commanders in the playoffs. I'm not worried about. I think you said a calamity of different things that happened, Tony, and I completely agree. So many things happened, whether it was Jake Elliott missed field goals, whether it was CJ Gardner-Johnson being chucked out of the game, whether it was Hurts concussion, Sweat not being there. It's so many things that I just don't see it happening again. But the biggest takeaway from me is the Eagles are not the same without Jalen Hurts. And it's not just his play, but him not being there affects the way others play around him and can contribute.
Yeah, spot on with that one. I put in the notes, thinking about the game back and talking about the sort of the collection of issues. It felt, for the Game of Thrones fans out there, the spoiler alert, the death of Jon Snow midway through, I think season 4 or 5, when he gets betrayed by the Night's Watch, and they all sort of come out one by one and stick the knife in him it's horrible. It's a horrible scene, and that game just felt like that to me. It felt like every time something bad happened, another guy's just coming and going, "Yeah, there you go, he goes."
It's a really good analogy.
And in the end, but obviously, for those that have seen the entire series, he gets resurrected and he comes back to life and takes on the world and wins everything.
Can I tell you a quick Jon Snow story? Which I saw.
You know him. He's your second, third brother's cousin.
No, I'm not related. And I don't know him.
You
Never met him.
Nothing, Jon Snow.
You know nothing, Jon Snow. Igret. Oh God, I fancied her when I was reading the books, and I fancied her when I was watching the TV program as well. So Jon Snow, there was a video of him on Instagram or something the other day, and he said he was driving in England and he was speeding. He knew he was speeding, and a policeman pulled him over, and he said, "You know what you've been doing, blah, blah, blah." Anyway, long story short, he goes, "Right, so I can do one or two things. I can either book you in now, drive you down to the station, you'll get a fine, you might lose your license, blah, blah, blah. Or you can tell me if John's alive in the next season of Game of Thrones."
And he absolutely tell him what he wants to hear then.
and he said, "You're right," Phil. He said, "But if your answer's not the one I want, I'm taking you to get booked in." And he told him and he got away with it. Nothing to do with Eagles, just thought it was quite a funny story. Good analogy, Phil.
Yeah, absolutely. It just felt like, one thing after another, slow death by 1,000 paper cuts, as they say, but I think they were a little bit more severe than paper cuts, to be honest. But as you said, Jalen's in the concussion protocol now, and as we've spoken about many times on this pod, they tend to miss the following week. However, I guess my naiveness and my hypocrisy in this is I'm hoping that it didn't seem that bad, and how Jalen was sort of ready to come back in. I know that doesn't really mean a lot. I'm just hoping that does mean something, and that he was taken out earlier, or they didn't want to risk it, because ultimately we've seen what's happened with the Dolphins and Tua and the compounding concussions that can have a really serious impact going into the future. So I guess we'll find out as the week goes on. I think we've seen players of the Eagles who've had concussions come back a lot quicker than others. So it's not out of the question, but I think we need to be very much prepared for a week of predicting whether Kenny Pickett's gonna come in this game. I mean, I doubt they're going to bring Tanner McKee in. I know he couldn't come in the game this week because he was the emergency quarterback, so it would only be in an emergency, and Kenny Pickett was able to see out the game. But going into this game fresh, knowing that Jalen Hurts wouldn't be playing, do you think either of you jump in? Do you think Tanner McKee might potentially get a nod?
I don't know, unless, of course, Kenny Pickett is as injured as he was making out in the field yesterday. Interestingly, in the notes you've written, Phil, about Jalen Hurts seemingly being ready to come back in, I'm not sure if any of you have heard, but Seth Joyner has been speaking today about an inside piece of information that he's been given. He's actually broadcast this to say that Jalen Hurts was ready to come back into the game. That's why he was on the touchline with his helmet back on. But that someone more senior in the NFL had phoned in to say, "Do not let him back on the field," which there's no reason why that would have happened. And you know that I love a conspiracy theory. So if I was a betting man, which you both know that I'm not, I would have a lot of money on Jalen Hurts actually taking the field this week.
It's
And
interesting
more
you say
more
that.
and more
Sorry.
more and more. Sorry, Liam. More and more,
No.
we're seeing players coming back. The week after a concussion. In fact, Washington had 2 this week. Zach Ertz
Sure.
was one of them. I can't remember who the other one was, but they had 2. They had 2
Jeremy
that were in
Chin?
concussion. Yes, that's exactly the one, Liam. That's exactly the one. So they had 2 concussed the week earlier and back in this week. So I'm fully expecting Jalen to be on the field against Dallas on Sunday.
It's interesting. I was gonna say before you jumped in with that bit of information, I was gonna say bold take. I think Jalen Hurts starts next week. I've been thinking about it all day. A couple of players who have been held out recently by the Eagles have said the following week they were ready to go, but it was just a precaution that they didn't go. Now, some of these were concussion, some of these weren't concussion. But I think this game against Dallas is really important just to lock in the second seed, and I think they will take a calculated risk with Jalen, and allow him to play. I actually don't. I really don't see a scenario where Jalen Hurts doesn't play this coming Sunday.
Very bold. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't necessarily disagree with your logic there, Liam, either, but it's
because you can rest everyone against the Giants then.
yeah,
Like,
you
it's the
if it was the
perfect
other way
scenario.
round, if it was the other way round and it was the Giants then Cowboys, I'd probably say, yeah, fair enough, rest them against the Giants. We could probably maybe try and limp through against them trying to lose, like Tony said.
Yeah.
Take a breath, Phil. Right, let's get into it because we've got the good,
Sorry,
bad,
yeah.
and the damn right sexy. And we need to get through these as much as possible before Liam has to shoot off.
Well,
and
you're a
also,
better host than me. Look at you bringing us along. This is fantastic.
oh, thanks. Right, so I know I tend to start with the bad, get them out of the way, but I feel like because it's a losing podcast, and there always generally is more bad in the losing podcast, I feel like we're going to go through the good, get it out of the way, because it does feel a little bit like we're looking at a few good points, but every good point I put has a negative caveat. Slay, great game, poor moment in the game. CJ Gardner-Johnson, great game, poor moment in the game. And I feel like they're good, but they were tinged with sadness. So let's just get these guys out of the way. So Darius Slay had probably one of his best games I've seen in a long while. Had a Zach Bourne style game where every tackle seemed to be Darius Slay. Every tackle was on point. He was nailing people. He had 7 tackles, 5 of his own. He had a tackles for loss and 3 passes defended. He looked on fire. But like I said, he was at fault in the fourth quarter during one of the touchdown drives where he was out for a few snaps, apparent injury, and then came back fine, looking to get back into the game. My interpretation of it, and you guys might have a different interpretation, is that Slay came back in before anyone really expected him to come back in. He maybe came back in too soon before the coach had a chance to sort of make their substitutions. He comes back on. The player that he was relieving was on the other side of the field or wasn't on the pitch at the point in time. So when he realizes there's 12 men or someone shouts there's 12 men on the field, you need to get off. He then leaves this massive gaping hole, which then gets targeted for the touchdown drive by was it Crowder? I think it's he got that one. So I feel like it's a little bit for an old head of Slay's experience. You feel like maybe he was just too desperate to get back into the game and ends up causing a mistake because he's trying to correct it. And who was it I was listening to? I think it was Fran Duffy on PHLY. If you guys haven't listened to that today, where he says, you take the penalty, you stay on the field, you take the penalty, because if he's on the field, he potentially breaks that pass up or at least stops it far before it becomes a touchdown. The worst case scenario, you get tacked on a penalty at the end of it, or you get pass deflected and they get 10 yards up the field at best. Do you guys have any different takes on the Slay performance overall and the error that he seems to have made?
No, I mean, it doesn't make for good podcasting when I say no to that. But I think you've covered everything pretty well. For me, it's on coaching. In the majority, like you've said, could Slay have taken the penalty? Yeah, sure. For me, I saw way more positives in this game for Darius Slay going into the playoff run than that one particular calamity of a play. Was it unfortunate? Yes. Was it a big moment in the game? Yes. Am I worried about Slay's tactical nous? No. Am I more impressed with? Am I more confident in Slay's ability to play lights out between now and the end of the year, having seen the way he played? And I think someone said recently some of his stats are some of the best he's had as an entire career this year. So for me, it's not a nothing point. It's obviously poignant and worth talking about, but it's certainly not something I'm concerned about. Tony?
I'm in the same place. I thought he was locked down yesterday. He was really, really good. And this is another one of these series of unfortunate events that, in a way, you kind of say, well, it's good that we've got it out of the way now, because I'd rather it happen in this game than happen in the playoffs. I think if it was Quinion Mitchell that was in that situation, I would have said, yeah, it's 100% on
Good
coaching.
point.
But Slay is an older, wiser head. He should have known that actually that's the guy that I'm covering. I'm going to take the flag. I'm going to break up the play. I think it was Alameda Zacchaeus who went in for the touchdown on that
It
one.
was Zacchaeus. Did he go in for the touchdown or did he?
It did.
Yeah,
It was.
yeah.
There was two.
And
there
it was a poor tackle by Reed Blankenship, maybe
Yep.
up near the
They
goal
were, they
line.
were scrambling to cover across, and they were never in good positions to make tackles.
Yeah, it was completely busted as far as the coverage was concerned. But it is what it is. You know, you get these things out the way. You know, we're not going to make that mistake again. So
Agreed.
as long as we're learning from that, it's fine. You know, it's a nothing game. It's gone. You know, it's not a one and done situation. So I'm fine with it, and I'm with you, Liam. Actually, that shock horror that actually Slay is showing signs of his his best days from 2 years ago.
I think he might be able to go again next year at this rate.
Potentially, and I
Which I
think
never
maybe
thought coming to this season.
maybe it's because it's another indication of he's getting to see more of the action this season than he saw last season. Last season, everything was being on Bradbury's side. This year, it's all been on his side because Quinion's so locked down. Oh, we're going to say his name a bit later on. I'm afraid it's going to come up in the conversation, but for reasons which
top 5 most influential Eagles players.
Well, you never know.
Conspicuous by his absence. Right. Moving on then. Take us through then the other guy that I mentioned who had a sort of a really good game, but one really boneheaded moment, or not boneheaded moment, because I feel that's a bit harsh on him.
Bonehead Cafe. Ooh,
I
haven't
don't
heard
think
that one in a while.
This is not a Barnett situation, but take us through Gardner Johnson, Tony, and his impact on the game.
So he turned up more and more. He's becoming an influence. I remember a pod that we did, Evans, maybe week 3, week 4, where we spoke about who's your biggest disappointment this season, and I'm pretty sure that I mentioned CJGJ at that point.
I think we all did.
Yeah, I think we did. It was one of those reflective moments that was like, actually, he's not really shown up for us this season so far. And I think the bye week did the guy a load of good. He is exerting his influence. There was a really interesting comment actually in the WhatsApp group last night where I can't remember who it was that had said it, and forgive me for whoever
Well, if it was
but
interesting, it must have been me, Tony. Come on.
it certainly was not. We'll come on to your comments a bit later on. But whoever it was that said it will know if you're listening, and that was we lost a quarterback on the offense, and actually we lost a quarterback on the defense when CJGJ left the field. Now we don't know why he left the field. Maybe he was a complete dick. Will we ever know? I actually don't know. But it was incredibly noticeable the relief that that we were given when he went off was with McCollum and Avonte Maddox, and we just weren't at the races. I'm pretty convinced if Chauncey had been on the field for that last play of the game, that would have been broken up and it would never have gone to Jameson Crowder. So it's another one of those moments in the game where, had something differently happened during the game and altered its course, then we'd be talking about a winning pod here. And that's the influence that I think that CJGJ is having on our backfield at the moment, our defensive backs. I think he's holding it together. He's obviously not the green dot, but I think he's the guy who's probably talking more and more to Bon and Dean about the plays that are coming and where he wants them to go. And I just think he's a huge influence. And whether he's in the good column or the bad column, I don't think it really matters. What matters is that we're talking about him and the influence that he's having on the team now.
It's a very good point.
I think it can be. Sorry, Liam. I think he can be often. You could probably put a CJ Gardner-Johnson good and CJ Gardner-Johnson bad in every pod notes we do because he's just such a volatile player. But what I will say is, to add to that, I agree with your comments about how influential he is, and I'd much rather him be who he is. But what we'll say is how many, like, there's the one before he became an Eagles player, we've seen him getting punched by the Bears offensive player. I get the feeling he is very good at saying those types of things that are going to be a red flag to a bull.
You said he was a dick. You said he may have been a dick, Tony. And let's be very clear. He absolutely is a dick, but he's our wee dick. Like, that's not very insightful podcasting here, but like he's not an intelligent human being. Like you could tell, like in the interactions on the sideline, but the players love him. Like the dressing room loves him, like 100%. I say he's not intelligent. That's a bit harsh. He's obviously got football IQ, but he's certainly a dick. There's no doubt. There's no doubt in my mind. Like any other team would hate CJ. Like looking at the Eagles, will hate CJ Gardner-Johnson, like without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, I think he rubs players up the wrong way on both sides of the ball, when he's on his own team and on the other team. But I feel like the reaction, because we haven't got a video of the second personal foul, which is another,
He looked shocked.
Tony conspiracy. Yeah, Tony conspiracy theories going wild that we've not seen replay of that. There's more voices coming down from above getting, get rid of that guy off the pitch. He's too good. But you could see that on the first personal foul replay, the official was right there, saw the punch or the swing come from the Washington Commander player, and he was immediately pointing at CJ Gardner-Johnson, throw the flag, and it's like it was almost like, I know what you're like. I know exactly what's happened here. You've said this. I heard you say this. So the fact that he swung at you, I'm not even interested in that. You've instigated this, and he just picked the wrong officials to try to do that with. And I think he's fired up, and it's just the wrong day, the wrong officiating crew that just were not prepared to let his bullshit slide, for lack of a better term. And it's just one of those days where sometimes it comes back to bite you, but we'd rather him play like that 17 games out of 17 and get busted for one of them than not play that like that at all. So I think it's a good point to make. Next.
Okay, sorry, before we go on, because it's literally just been, actually it was posted an hour and a half ago. CJ Gardner-Johnson. I was passionate after our QB took an illegal hit, so my emotions were everywhere. Didn't want to do anything to hurt the team, but a little trash talk. Come on now. ... I'm sorry. Love heart. He's our wee dick.
He says a little trash talk, but it was a lot. It's like when you get caught and you're like, oh, I only did that, sir. Like, don't you know what you're about? It's like, no, you didn't. You said
he
a
was
lot
definitely
worse than that.
suspended at school a lot, wasn't he?
Yeah. Well, yeah, more probably. Anyway, let's get the last couple good bits back out of the way before we get into the real meat and bones of the bad. Saquon Barkley was on course to sort of smash the overall the NFL record probably in this game, had things continued on the trajectory that they had in the first quarter. Two touchdowns, 29 rushes for 150 yards, 68-yard run for the second touchdown. Felt like we could have still won the game if when Pickett came in. I think that was the shining light that gave us that hope that we should be able to manage this even with Pickett in. the handoff starts to look clunky. He's not used to getting the ball off Pickett. Pickett isn't used to sort of playing with Saquon Barkley. It was never going to work that way. And as we've already mentioned before, once Jalen Hurts out of the game, you lose so many dynamic aspects of the offense that it becomes a lot easier to pinpoint him and stifle him out of the game, leaving Pickett to have to throw it a lot, which, we can get into and say I didn't do a terrible job of, but, he's no Hurts and the game just was not there. It was 20%
He's
of what it
awful.
was. We'll get into him in a minute. You'll get your chance. So that's Barkley, but yeah, he's about 268 yards away from the record now with 2 games left to go. Still very much possible if he manages to get another 150-yard game and a 100-yard game. Doesn't seem out of the question. He could even smash 250 against the Giants if he really
I think
wanted
we
to.
need 200. Just on this point, I think if Saquon's going to break the record, he needs 200 rushing yards against the Cowboys, because I don't want to see him out there for more than 10 snaps versus the Giants if we beat the Cowboys.
That's another good point. Yeah,
and he gets it and this is going to be okay. I'm going to give you a prediction now, Tony. You're going to like this one. If Saquon Barkley gets 150 rushing yards and he's got 118 or whatever left to get in the final week against the Giants, Eagles fans everywhere are going to be in absolute fucking uproar because Nick Sirianni will play Saquon Barkley in the Giants game to get him his record, because that's the kind of coach Nick Sirianni is. He likes players to get their records. He does stuff for the players. He'll be well aware of it. He'll know how much it means. And Eagles fans will be in uproar everywhere about Nick Sirianni. And if I'm completely honest, they would be right to do so, because there's a time and a place for getting your records, and there's a time and a place for getting this, that, and the other. If the Eagles go to the Super Bowl this year, 2 players need to be healthy: Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley.
Personally, I think that I give Nick a little bit of credit. I think he wouldn't do what going back to the decision where Barkley didn't go back in the game to break the single game record, and he wasn't interested in the stats, but Sirianni wanted to do it. I like to think he'd maybe take a different approach a couple of weeks before the playoffs, and I think that would maybe overall, at least someone like Lurie or Roseman will be like, fuck the record. No one wants to see Saquon Barkley not in the playoffs with this team. Liam, take us through AJ Brown and his impact in the game, because I feel like he had quite a special impact in the game, especially once Pickett came in, being his go-to target.
Yeah, I mean, AJ Brown's a happy boy, right? Jalen Hurts isn't throwing him the ball. 98 yards and a touchdown. I find this really interesting. Right? So look, let me just answer your question. AJ Brown had a phenomenal game, and would have had an even bigger game. I mean, he was all over Lattimore. He made Lattimore look like an absolute rookie, and Lattimore has been one of the best cornerbacks in the league for a while now. Lattimore started the game well. There was 2 DPIs. There could have been 3, but of the 2 that were given, one was a little suspect when Lattimore kind of fell into his legs at the end there. I'm not sure that was a catchable ball for AJ Brown on that second DPI. And the only reason the Eagles scored any real points after Hurts went out was because of Saquon Barkley and the AJ Brown DPIs. Other than that, Pickett we did nothing on offense. But look, AJ Brown had a great game, nearly 100 yards with the backup QB. He's incredible on one-on-one contested catches. He's incredible in one-on-two contested catches. And it just shows you, sometimes when we're on this podcast and we talk about Jalen Hurts throwing the ball to AJ, and I know the last couple of weeks, well, not last week, but a couple of weeks beforehand, people were like, he's not targeting AJ. Over AJ Brown's career at the Eagles with Jalen Hurts has targeted AJ all the time, to the detriment of all other receivers. And the reason is he's the best wide receiver on the team. He's the best pass catcher on the team. And it was so obvious to me that Pickett was going to AJ Brown over and over again, because he knew it was his best chance of a completion. Throw it to the best guy on the pitch who can win a 50-50 ball. And AJ Brown did a great job of that. I thought Devontae Smith had a really good game until that drop at the end there. Every time his name was called, he made a good catch, made positive net yards. I think Calcaterra had his worst game as a Philadelphia Eagle. And I think, Tony, you may have mentioned something like that in the chat yesterday, or if it wasn't you, there was a couple of people who did. I don't think there's a lot more to say. But look, we know AJ Brown's a top 3 wide receiver in the league. He showed he can do it with a backup quarterback. He did a great job, and he certainly wasn't the reason we lost. So he has my flowers.
Cool. Yeah. One last good point. Liam, you highlight this as your nomination for Damn Right Sexy, so I might let you just carry on into this one and make your case. But you've picked Nolan Smith. Do you want to tell us why you've highlighted him for this game?
Yeah, I mean, look, 3 tackles, 1 sack, 2 fumble recoveries. I think Nolan Smith is. We talked about him last week on the podcast. Nolan Smith is turning out to be the player that we all hoped he would be, and he's one of my big question marks coming into this season was Nolan Smith. Tony, I think you said on the podcast last week he's filling in that gap that we thought we had with Bryce Huff, and he's just doing a sensational job. I don't think he's been given enough flowers to continue the Zay Flowers theme here, and I think he deserves it. And to be honest, Barkley, you could definitely give it to Barkley. But the second half performance from Barkley was poor, even though he was stopped at the line of scrimmage. There wasn't a lot of players to choose from here for a standout game for the Eagles, and I feel like if Nolan Smith deserves it, and probably not just for this game. I just think for the last 4 or 5 weeks, has he got a sack in every game, 4 games in a row now? Like it's something like that.
Yeah, either a sack for himself or a half sack, I think.
Yeah, and he was everywhere last week. So I think I'm probably giving it to him on last week's performance and this week's performance. For me, Nolan Smith deserves the Damn Right Sexy this season. And I don't think there's a better week to give it to him than this week, given the performance of the rest of the team. 2 fumble recoveries, fantastic. He's agile, he's quick, he's fast. He spots the ball, he attacks the ball when it goes on the ground. He attacks the ball when it's in the quarterback's hands. He's good at stopping the run. If he continues his trajectory, we could have a Micah Parsons type player in Nolan Smith. They certainly have the same physical attributes as each other, and could be a jersey that Eagles fans might want to think about getting next year, because Brandon Graham didn't start his career hot, and Nolan Smith didn't start his career hot. Maybe we're seeing the next iteration of Brandon Graham here.
Tony, do you have any other suggestions for Damn Right Sexy? Or are you happy with Liam's nomination this week?
Just thinking about not being able to stand up from my desk here and walk out into my house because the thought of Nolan Smith becoming the next BG has given me a semi. And do you know what? Actually, that could be a really good take, Liam. That could be your best take on this pod. That Nolan Smith could be emerging as the next BG. I'm never wanting to get ahead of myself, or as Phil says, get over my skis on it. But do you know what? He's emerging, and if Bryce Huff were to be fit tomorrow, I'm not convinced he'd be a starter on our team.
I don't know how many snaps you get, Tony, to be honest.
I think you're right.
Well, yeah. I've got the perfect remedy for your semi, Tony. Let's get onto the bad and bring you back down with a thud, I imagine.
Phil, can you not let me savour the moment? I'm a 52-year-old man. I don't get semis very often. Without the help of a blue pill.
What is it they say? Never trust a fart, never waste an erection. And there's another saying. I think it might be from something like Me, Myself, and Irene, or something like that. Anyway, so someone will know what I'm talking about.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Philosophy from Liam O'Neill.
Never waste a fart. I mean,
no, never trust a fart.
I know. I'm taking
never waste an erection.
Deliberately mixed. Right. Fucking.
Next week's podcast is sponsored by. Have you got erectile dysfunction?
Just start talking about Nolan Smith. Picture of Nolan Smith.
I'm picturing you smiling, actually, Tony, next to the camera.
I'm that guy, this old bald guy.
Oh, God.
Let's steer this conversation out of the blue and into the red.
Very good.
Flags everywhere in this game on both sides of the ball, and I'm hoping we can be balanced on this one, because it definitely was a balanced fuck up from the referees. It wasn't just deliberately targeted at us. However, we are going to focus on the particularly egregious ones that were on our side of the ball. Although, quickly caveat that, I have put the DPIs, and you've already mentioned that, Liam, at least one of them was a bit suspect. It felt a very weird moment. It's like they were all over us with flags, but then they suddenly give us 2 DPIs on the bounce, one of which was a bit suspect. The rest were terrible, like you said. Carter being flagged for pushing someone away tamely. It was nothing. They were looking to give it. And then obviously the CJ Gardner-Johnson 2 personal foul ejection penalties. Were also a bit soft, but again, we don't know what was said, and we do know we do trust that CJ will have said something very, very, very not safe for air.
There's one more, Phil. Sorry, that isn't on this list. I've just remembered it. We got a roughing the passer penalty given against us.
Oh yeah.
That was really, really soft. And then later in the game, Pickett got absolutely fucking mullered on a roughing the passer call, and they never called it at all. Just remember that.
The one thing I hate about this game is it never fails to not give you reasons to feel like the game is rigged. And I'm not saying it is rigged or that it's rigged every time, but there's always something you look at the game and go, look, the only way to explain that is that someone is deliberately trying to affect the course of a game. And you're right, the inconsistency in calling the flags is just makes watching the game shit. It deprives you. Feel like the only reason why you would want to seriously affect a game is to make the game better, to make the game more competitive, to make a game less one-sided.
The NFL do that. They've come out to admit that before, that they want games to be more competitive. And the referees will probably, conspiracy theory time, Tony. The referees.
Let me jump in.
Go. You go.
Let me jump in. Who was the refereeing crew last night?
Wasn't it the same as against the Bucks?
It was. I don't know if it was the same against the Bucks, but it was Sean Smith's crew. Sean Smith's crew was the same crew that missed the Jadeveon Clowney egregious hit on Carson Wentz, and they also missed a false start by the right guard on that game-winning pass last night as well. So, they tune me into a conspiracy theory anytime, but no one likes us. We don't care. We just have to win the hard way, boys.
Are they lizards in referee outfits? Are you a David Icke conspiracy theorist as well, Tony?
You took that too far, mate. You took that too far.
But overall, the flags always seem to have the officiating, full stop, seems to have had a massive impact on the Eagles' season, and you can argue that rather than talking about whether the Eagles are winning in spite of Sirianni, we should argue whether the Eagles are winning in spite of the officiating that's been going on in most of our games this season. It needs to change, and you see it called out a lot, and it just the reasons they're given, it's just disingenuous and it means nothing. But talking of the dirty hit that was mentioned earlier, let's move on to the Hurts concussion situation. I know we've briefly spoken about it already, but Luvu came in with an apparent head-to-head, helmet-to-helmet contact, which then results in Hurts leaving the game for a concussion check. Never comes back in the game after that point. Seriously affects the game. We've kind of covered it already, mostly, but he looks set to come back in, and we've spoken about it. And Tony's given his conspiracy theory, or not conspiracy theory, his source in Seth Joyner, or his source in Seth Joyner's source, giving us the indication that there were powers that be infecting that game. What's your take on the actual tackle and the situation itself, Liam?
Yeah, can I come in on this? I don't know whether this is going to be a popular take. I don't think it was that bad. I feel like it was slightly late. I don't think the helmet-to-helmet contact was like a damaging piece of contact. His head hitting the turf is what concussed him. And I know the head-to-head did make his head go down a little bit, but he was going down there anyway. For me, and feel free to disagree with me. Maybe I need to look at it again. Some of the slow-mo replays, maybe make it look a little bit worse than what it was. For me, I don't think it was that bad. If anything, it's on Jalen Hurts to slide there and not go in head first. But that's my opinion on it.
Yeah, Tony, you want to weigh in?
Sadly, I have to agree with you again. it wasn't the Carson Wentz had given himself up when Jadeveon Clowney hit him. Jalen hadn't given himself up, so I think he was fair game. You could maybe argue that there was some helmet to helmet there, but it was the whiplash and the head hit the turf that caused the concussion. And you can actually see when he got up, he was all over the place.
He was. I was really worried when I saw it first.
Yeah.
And you could see him looking around, couldn't you?
Yeah, well, for sure. However, he did compose himself particularly quickly. So, maybe he could have come back into the game. It's history. Who are we to say?
Can I just say one thing, Tony, just before you go on? That's okay. This can sound like such a weird silver lining, right? But I think it is a silver lining. Tua Tagovailoa, when he gets concussed, has severe concussions, worrying concussions in a way that makes most of us feel like he couldn't play again. Not every NFL player gets concussions like that. Some do, and if you do, they normally seem to be systemic and they happen again and again, like they have with Tua. Silver lining for me is Jalen Hurts got mildly concussed, and he didn't have that kind of reaction, and he's probably going to be okay long term, and hasn't been concussed as far as I'm aware in his entire career, including college.
Don't think so.
Weird silver lining, but yeah.
I think there's a scale on it. I mean, you look at some of the ones that Tua's
taken. There's got to be different grades, Tony. Do you know what I mean? Like grade in medical terms.
You look at that Trevor Lawrence one. I think when we were at the watch along in Glasgow, and you look at the one that Carson Wentz took from Jadeveon Clowney. They were all patently dreadful hits that the guys have taken. So there must be some form of a scale. And of course, the human body reacts differently for different people. I think Jalen's maybe a bit more of a robot, a bit more of a machine than the other guys. But fingers crossed. It's a horrible piece of collateral damage from the NFL that you wish you could find a way to prevent it happening. But unfortunately, same as the gladiators in Rome, they've got to take some hits, I'm afraid, to give us a sport that we love. And you've just got to pray that every time a snap's taken, that all 22 players come out of that fit and healthy. And unfortunately, they don't.
You're here.
So, in a similar sort of tangent onto an injury, keeping a player out, wanting to come back in, who did eventually come back in, Josh Sweat obviously spent quite a large portion of the third quarter and fourth quarter on the sideline with an ankle injury or apparent ankle injury. We don't know how severe. We haven't seen the injury report. And I haven't managed to catch any of the Sirianni press conference to give if he's given any insight. So feel free to jump in if you guys have an update on that. But given how the game was going, do you think that Sweat would have been ruled out much earlier? Because he was questionable for a long time, and surely they know whether you want to bring a player back in, but maybe they kind of felt the game might need a Josh Sweat revival later on, give him an injection, strap up the ankle? Or am I in Tony's conspiracy corner here with that one?
No, I think you're right, Phil. I don't think he was ruled out the game because he probably could have come back in at any point, and we were looking particularly comfortable for a lot of the game until midway through that fourth quarter. So why risk him when you don't need to? When Nolan Smith was playing lights out, and to an extent we were getting home, it was CJ going out that was having the biggest impact because there was no one spotting Jaden Daniels in the runs, which we'll probably come on to shortly. So I think we'd kind of held him out ourselves, just to give him that rest, just to give him the respite from what was probably a wee niggle that he'd picked up. And I think you're absolutely right. In that last drive of the game, he appeared from the sideline again because there was so much at stake.
Yeah, I think that's about right. Liam, any different takes, or shall we move on?
No, I'm not really worried. Let's see what the injury report says this coming week. I don't think they would have put him back in the game if they thought it was something really serious. I don't think the game meant, it wasn't a season on the line game where you put someone back in to really risk a longer term injury. So, it's not really a big talking point for me.
Cool. Well, let's get on to the main man himself, Kenny P, the saviour of the day, not as the situation ended up being. He's definitely not an adequate backup. I will try and caveat that and say it's always difficult for a backup quarterback to come in mid-game. It's different. If he had to play this weekend, touch wood, he doesn't. I would like to think that there'll be a lot better game plan with him in mind, a lot more time to practice the little intricacies. So I would expect him to have a much better game if he did have to play against the Cowboys this weekend, to give him a little bit of leeway. However, I think we've mentioned it already. Once Hurts goes out of the game, you lose the tush push, the read option game, the RPO side of things, any sense of fear from the commanders, and it just makes your life so much harder. So it reminds me a little bit of when we obviously had Mariota as the backup quarterback last season. But the reason we had Mariota and kind of Gardner Minshew as well was that they had a little bit of dual threat kind of side, and that's
Gardner
not really...
Minshew is here, and Mariota's here, and Pickett's here. For those listening in, it's pretty obvious what I did there.
Yes, in order of who you'd rather have in the team right now, I think we'd all love to have Gardner Minshew back as the backup quarterback. But
I think we could win games with Gardner Minshew in this team. Yeah, for sure.
Kenny Pickett, it just doesn't have that run game, and also his throwing is questionable as well. So he's always going to be. It was a bit of a shock. I don't think anyone's really been on board with him coming in at the start of the season. No one was like, "This is a really good signing," other than the fact that he is a former starting quarterback, so he had the starting experience. And we were like, okay, well, maybe he won't be so daunted coming in as maybe Tanner McKee would. His stat line reads 14 completions of 24 for 142 yards, a touchdown, 3 sacks, and 1 interception. Not horrible numbers, but in terms of the situation he was brought in, but they're not good reading, guys. And I'm well aware of that. And it also is not good enough to make use of the 5 turnovers that we have late on in the game. Like, it felt very much like we had the points on the board. Let's try and defend them because we're not going to get that many more, and that's how it turned out to be. Could Tanner McKee have had a better impact behind center?
Yes.
I don't. You reckon so?
Yeah, I do. I said from the beginning of the season. I said it in preseason last year. Like, I think I had Tanner McKee as my QB2 coming into the season.
I think that's it feels like that was the obvious takeaway from training camp. That Tanner McKee had a
trying
great...
to get some more draft capital, Phil. I mean, that's the only way I see it. Like, he's picked up Pickett for a cheap deal. He's hopeful that Pickett plays well enough so that he can flip him to a QB needed team. Teams have needed QBs this year. No one's gone for him. It's a failed move by Howie. I'm already there with that.
My skepticism around Tanner McKee is the fact that, again, the reason why I mentioned about Pickett is he had starting NFL experience. Tanner McKee doesn't, and you generally don't know. There's a lot of difference from training from preseason to a real life NFL game where linebackers and edge rushers are coming at you a million miles an hour and want to hurt you. There's a difference. I'm not saying he wouldn't do it, but that's the uncertainty with Tanner McKee, and I think that's...
I'd rather the idealism of seeing what someone has in Tanner McKee at QB2 rather than someone who's proven to be a failed starter. I only say this because I've spoken to a lot of Pittsburgh people this week. For those of you who don't know on the podcast, I am moving to the US in 2025. I actually got some really exciting news today that I have a date for that move. I'll still be running British and Irish Eagles with you lovely gentlemen and PSI, and obviously I'll be on the podcasts. But the people who are running the parts of the business I'll be moving over to are Pittsburgh based. So I've spoken to them last week a little bit, and I spoke to a couple of them today, and they were laughing at the fact that we even gave Pickett a chance based on what they saw with their time with Pickett at Pittsburgh. So I don't think it's... Well, I'm very negative on Pickett. And just to finish off, and I want Tony's opinion. It wasn't the 3 sacks and the interception and the 1 touchdown and the 14 for 24. It was the inability to move the chains. It was the inability to... It was 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. Defense back on the field. Defense back on the field. Defense back on the field. He hasn't got the ability to... he made 1 throw with anticipation, which was good, I think, to Devontae Smith before he turned around and came back. Other than that, I just thought it was really poor. Maybe I'm in the minority. Maybe the other podcasts have said they were pretty happy with him. I saw ESP said it wasn't a bad game for Pickett, but I haven't listened to the other podcast. But for me, awful. Don't want to see him again throw a ball for the Eagles.
He did have a couple of 4th down conversions, but again, they were sort of like not Hail Marys, but their last ditch sort of last chance. Like, if you don't make this, the game's over. And he managed to make a couple of them, so he deserves credit for that. But you could tell that the team was definitely deflated, and there's just not that kind of chemistry. But yeah, appreciate Tony's point of view on this. What's your overall take?
What do you got, T-Dog? Am I wrong?
Well, no, you're not wrong in respect to the fact he's a huge downgrade from Jalen Hurts, but typically going from QB1 to QB2 in any NFL team, you're taking a huge downgrade going from 1 to 2. When he came into the game, the Eagles were winning 7-0. He immediately threw a touchdown to AJ Brown, threw him open, was a great pass. You're 14-0 up. You can then argue, well, he wasn't throwing people open. You're absolutely right. He doesn't have the maneuverability of Jalen Hurts, of Josh Allen, of any one of the top QBs in the league. But you could also argue that he threw the ball to Saquon Barkley and Barkley dropped it. That would have iced the game. He also threw the ball to
Devontae Smith as well.
He also threw the ball to Devonta Smith. Smith dropped it. That would have iced the game.
Yeah.
So, in actual fact, he would have outscored Washington from the point he came on the pitch if those had been caught. Now,
did he pass the eye test for you though, Tony?
Absolutely not, Liam. But you don't go in the eye test; you go in fact.
No, yeah, it's true.
No, he doesn't.
I knew I was being hypocritical. I said at the start of the podcast. I know it's a little bit against me, but
no, he absolutely doesn't. But he was almost a beat out in some of his passing last night, and you've got to expect that from a guy who's coming in and not really thrown a ball all season, apart from in a blowout game where he comes on just to take a knee or hand the ball to Kenny Gainwell or Will Shipley at the end of a match. So, I'm not all out on him, but I am all out on the Eagles winning the Super Bowl if he's going to have to feature. If he's going to have to feature as a quarterback. So I'm maybe not as down on him as you are. I think there was, as I've already said, a litany of things last night that caused us to lose that game. But coming into the game as 7-0 and losing the game by 3, when there was plenty of other things that could have happened. That you take the Slay should have been on the pitch, should have been off the pitch. You take the drops, you take the fumbles, you take all of these different types of things that all add up. And unfortunately, it wasn't just all on Pickett's shoulders. There's some more senior guys there who you would have expected more from, and are completely out of character. The fact that Smithy dropped that ball, and Saquon, I know he did what he did against the Falcons, but he's been impeccable since then. So
he has a drop in the locker. Do you remember the Giants guy podcast I went on about a month and a half ago?
Yeah, that's right. And they were saying actually it's not unusual. What you're seeing is the Saquon that we saw in New York, and he's susceptible to these types of things. And there was a couple of fantastic tackles as well. I mean, Bobby Wagner going through on Barkley when these things, you just suck it up and you move on from it. But if Pickett's our QB, and Liam, you asked me the question on the WhatsApp group last night, are you now convinced that the Eagles could get by with Saquon and AJ and a backup? And the answer's no, absolutely not. I was well ahead of myself last week and probably a bit excited about how good the defense was, and that was found wanting a bit on that last drive last night as well.
Yeah, and I don't blame you for feeling that way last week, because while I said I don't think they could, I didn't know I was 100% right, and I think yesterday has shown that's the case. I've got a few minutes left, boys. I've stayed longer than I said I would.
That's fine.
So
I've only got one more thing I need you around for before we go.
Okay,
and that is the Loch Lomond Play of the Week, which there is only one, because everything else was shite. So there is no debate this time. It is Saquon Barkley's 68-yard touchdown run, which kind of came out of nowhere. I was frantically on Twitter, refreshing to find out what the status of Jalen Hurts' concussion check was, and it popped up saying Saquon Barkley touchdown, and the feed was still very much in the huddle at the time, and I was just like, "Oh, this guy has no idea what he's talking about." Looked up and just saw him start to run, quickly put in the group Barkley just to wind Liam up because he was getting upset with everyone being ahead. So I was super ahead, even ahead of myself. I was looking into the future, and 68-yard touchdown run really gave us that boost to think that we were going to go into the game and still manage to win despite all the adversity that we were going to be facing or had faced thus far. Any disagreements there, boys?
Absolutely not. I mean, I think he hit over the 20 miles per hour mark 5 times on 5 separate runs this year, which has broken some sort of record. Unbelievable home run hitter.
That was the one play that got us all out of our seats last night, particularly after just conceding a touchdown. To go 21-7 back up, you're 14-17, you're thinking, shit, this is going to slip away from us here. They're going to close in and take away, particularly with Pickett under centre. But let's not, and we sometimes talk about a series of plays. Saquon's the winner at the end. But we sometimes talk about a series of plays. Let's not forget that our defence managed to turn the ball over 5 times last night and give it back to us. So you've got to give those guys flowers. Yes, they were a bit soft, a bit like my non-semi now, having spoken about all these bands. But 5 times we won the ball back last night. That's no mean feat, and any team, getting 5 turnovers, a positive 4 turnovers, should win a game of football. So kudos to the defence as well, despite we were all particularly disappointed at the way that they gave up that last touchdown.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, you could easily put Reed's interception late in the game as being a key moment in the game. Reason that's not in there because it came to nothing, and I feel bad because it's a great play, but there was nothing after it. It kind of didn't lead to anything. If it had led to a touchdown, game-winning touchdown, then that would probably have superseded Saquon Barkley just for the moment in the game and the key, but it didn't. So it
led to the Smitty drop.
Yep, and I think we want to banish that from the memory as well.
Yeah, I think we do. Why don't we do these top 5s before you dash, Liam?
Well, I'll go first, and then I'll dash, and I'll listen to your guys back because I'm getting evil eyes here, and I need to pack. Just 2 things before we move on from that. Our safeties seem to be ball hawks at the moment. All of our interceptions come from both of our safeties because CJ Gardner-Johnson also got an interception in the game as well. There was something else I was going to say, but now I've completely forgotten it, so it can't have been anything interesting. So the next game, I'll just kick it off, Phil, if that's okay, and then I'll leave you guys too, and I'll listen back. Is the 5 most important Eagles players on the team, and I'm gonna do them in reverse order, giving the most important person, putting the most important player last. Last. So that's that. That's that. That is that. Okay. My 5th most important player for the Eagles, making my top 5, is Quinyon Mitchell. I already think he is one of the most important pieces. Sorry, no, it's not. Let me change that. Completely forgot about someone while I was doing my top 5. My 6th most important player is Quinyon Mitchell. The 5th most important player for the Eagles. You might find this a bit mind-boggling, but I'm going AJ Brown as the 5th most important player for the Eagles. He's the best wide receiver on our team. He's the best catching receiver. He's a top 3 wide receiver in the league, and he comes up big time for the Eagles every week. I would be surprised if AJ Brown doesn't make your top 5, but there's so many players in the Eagles team that could make it. That maybe I wouldn't be so surprised. So give me AJ Brown. I think this team are not quite the same without him, regardless of who's throwing him the football. The 4th most important player in the team for me is still Lane Johnson. at right tackle, still playing at a Pro Bowl caliber level. Our win rate is on the floor when we don't play him. He gives Jalen time to make plays with his legs or with his arm. And while left tackle is normally the most important position for a quarterback, Lane Johnson is that good that I think he's one of the most valuable players for the Eagles. On the defensive side of the ball, the third most important player for me is Jalen Carter. I think he's a difference maker. The amount of stoppages we've had in the run or sacks and pressures to the QB that he hasn't even been given the stat count for because he's blowing it up and making those plays is unbelievable. I think he's one of the best, if not the best, defensive tackle in the league already. He is literally that good. The second most important player for me is Saquon Barkley. I just think he's an absolute difference maker. I know Kenny Gainwell could do a good job, but Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts are going to be the two of the reasons why the Eagles win the Super Bowl this year. Defense does win championships. There's no doubt about it. But recently we've seen that offenses win championships, and Barkley is a difference maker. And you won't be surprised for me to say that Jalen Hurts is the most valuable player for the Eagles. I think we saw that yesterday. The team was different without him. I've spoke about it already on this podcast about the offense just being completely different when Kenny Pickett is in there. I don't think you win a Super Bowl without a franchise quarterback. You've seen over the last few years, it's been Tom Brady, it's been Mahomes, it's been the Lions QB, who's not the Lions QB, the LA QB, whose name I seem to have forgotten for the Rams. Stafford. You do not win a Super Bowl in the last 5-6 years without a very good quarterback. So there you go. So for me, that was AJ Brown, Lane Johnson, Jalen Carter, Saquon Barkley, and Jalen Hurts. With that, I look forward to hearing if you think it's shite. I look forward to hearing what yours are, and I'm going to go pack for Ireland, gentlemen. And I look forward to listening to the rest of the podcast. I look forward to hopefully watching the Eagles beat Dallas if my dad lets me watch the TV at his house next Sunday. I hope you get to watch it as well, Tony. Love you, boys.
Yeah. Merry Christmas, mate.
Merry Christmas. I should have said that. Merry Christmas.
So I'm going to take over now, Phil, and I'm going to give you my 5. But before I do so, and this is for your benefit, Liam, given that you've just left the pod, this is a complete setup, you wee dick. So the reason that you're doing this is so that Phil and I both have to say that Jalen Hurts is one of the top 5 most influential players. Of course he is. He's a franchise quarterback. The franchise quarterback is always going to be your top 1 in terms of the most influential players. So I'm going to tell you that Jalen Hurts is in my top 5. I think there's arguments for so many different players to be in this top 5, and it was interesting to see some of the things coming through on the WhatsApp group with differences in opinion and reasons for and reasons against and so on and so forth. Actually, I think you could pick a top 10 because in the absence of numbers 6 and 9 or numbers 4 and 8, then you're not going to have the team that we have just now. So very quickly, Phil, before I hand back to you, my 5 are 4 of them, the same as Liam's: Jalen Carter, AJ Brown, Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts. And the 5th one, and it's probably only really just come to mind the last 2 or 3 weeks where he's been beginning to ball out. You could argue Zach Bond, you could argue Nakobe Dean, you could argue Quinion Mitchell, Slay, all of these guys that are in the defensive backfield. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, we really missed him last night. I think that's one of the reasons that we lost the game. I think he is the heartbeat of the backfield, and he's the guy that's pulling the strings back there and making things happen for us. So that's my 5, Phil. Carter, Brown, Barkley, Hurts, CJGJ. Who's your 5?
Well, I see we've gone back on our original plan to exclude Hurts as a part of a joke. I'm disappointed that you folded there, Tony. So I don't know whether to go with my real one or go with my. It's clear evidence. It was a setup. I think we all knew that I was going to before I was going to be hosting, I was going to downright protest and refuse to give my 5 in sheer disgust that this was just a blatant attempt for us to have to say the words Hurts is MVP of this team or one of the MVP of the team, and he is. It goes without saying that game, the shocker, the most recent game being evidence of that, and he decides to pull it out now. So it's very suspicious. But okay, we'll play your game, Liam. Mine is Hurts, Saquon, Carter, like the three of you have gone for. Brown misses out narrowly, but Brown was a late substitution before when we were going to leave Hurts out deliberately because he's the sixth one for me. I think a bit like Liam. I've gone for Bourne and Reed Blankenship for me, and I went more with this season specifically, maybe a bit more recency bias because it goes without saying Lane Johnson's just a hugely important player for this team. And like you said, there should be a top 10, and Lane will definitely be in the top 10, and maybe I'd freely include him in the top 5 if I had 5 more to go. I feel like Reed has had such a good impact on the season. I'd almost group the safeties as one and the linebackers as another, and say it's Bourne and CJ as my number 4, and Bourne and Nakobe Dean as my 5, but I can't. So I'm picking one as almost like a representative of those two areas of position groups on the field. So I feel like they need to come in because I feel like if we lost Zach Bourne or Nakobe Dean, we lose such an important tackling prospect in the middle of the field. The reason the defense is able to keep it short and give the defensive line a much more better chance of getting sacks and QB hits and pressures. And with Reed and CJ doing sort of a similar field, mopping up the seconds, the interceptions between the two of them, however many they've actually had combined this season, must be close to 8 or 9, I think, given that the impact that Reed has had this season, having at least 4, I think, himself. It just goes to show that we've got such a good team, it's hard to pick the points because we'd miss every single player that's playing that team because that team is playing lights out. The recent game aside. But like I said, everything that could go wrong went wrong in Murphy's Law game against the Commanders. So I think that we can reasonably, no one can really quibble at anyone else's opinion because I think you'd say that the entire team is invaluable. So any 5 you pick is going to be agreed. It's just a matter of how high you place them in your top 20. So that's mine. Liam, thank you very much for forcing us to admit that. We really enjoyed this section. But the next section I'm really looking forward to, Tony, something that you popped in the group on Sunday morning that gave us all a bit of distraction from the long wait into Sunday evening, was creating your own Eagles chant. Now, I gave my entry. Mick gave a couple. Liam came in with one questionable entry. But the rest of the group certainly chirped in as well. It was great fun sort of trying to sort of play them all in your head, and some worked, some really worked, some were questionable, Liam. But so if all 3 of us were here right now, I'd say, Tony, give us your top 3, me and Liam will pick. But I feel that since Liam has now left us and I have a horse in the race potentially, why don't you just give us your top 3 and which one you settled on for your number 1?
Let me just say, Phil, it was great sport for a Sunday morning. So for everyone who took some time out, drank far too much coffee, probably neglected pre-Christmas tasks, it was really good fun. And like you say, there were some brilliant entries. So I did a very scientific thing in terms of creating a top 3, and that was over some dinner tonight. Over some dinner tonight, I sat with my very long-suffering wife and my not-so-long-suffering daughter, and we went through the entries. Unfortunately, they made me sing most of them because they couldn't work out how the tunes went and stuff. So some honourable mentions, and actually, I'm going to have to kill you, Phil, because my daughter is now walking about the house singing "Howie, do 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 Howie." She doesn't know any of the other words, but she now knows Song 2 by Blur. It was a very good entry. She did mention about Liam's Philly Funk, that it went on a bit too long, that she couldn't see, or she couldn't imagine people listening or singing that on the terraces. So it went on a bit too long. And she does listen to the pod, Liam. and she says, sometimes like he does a wee bit on the pod as well, which I found particularly amusing. Ross, you never gave us the tune that your song went to, so I had everything that had dum dum dums and dum dum dums in it, but I just couldn't work that one out. So the top three, and actually I'm going to give you a top four, right, because two of them are mix, and the girls have chosen who they think the winner is, so no pressure here, Phil. The top three, the first is the Madness song to Our House, and that was entered by Macaulay Hurst Billet. The second in the list I'm going to give you is one that is the most irritating song in the world, but would actually work so well, particularly finishing with Dallas sucks, Dallas sucks, and then Super Bowl did it. So Richard Skinner with his Baby Shark. And the entry that I'm going to give you from Mick is the one that was Mambo number 5, which ends up being about being the Philly fan. Kayla actually preferred I Want It That Way, that finishes with the complete slight all about James Bradbury, but Yvonne thought that was too harsh to make the top three. So there you go. Take your pick. Mambo number 5, Baby Shark, or Madness. And this is for a bottle of Ben Lomond gin, Phil. So no pressure.
I can't go with Baby Shark because it's just too irritating. As great it was, I just can't, because I don't. And it's going to be in my head now anyway, and I feel like that's the reason why I'm going against it, because I'm not going to be able to stop thinking about it.
That's what makes it a good stadium chant, though.
Yeah, as long as I'm not in the stadium, that's fine.
Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts.
No, I'm going with the Mambo number 5 one. I just feel like that is like, it's similar to the Baby Shark one, because it lends itself so much. You can do so much with it, because it's basically just listing off women in the original song, but listing off players, and it's catchy, it's good, and it's also, it's got a bit of swing to it, so you can kind of get into it when you're having a good time at a game. A little bit of Saquon in my life, like, yeah, I can sing that, and that's not irritating at all. So I think I'm gonna settle on that one.
That is the one that the girls chose as well. Now, Mick, just to prove that this isn't a homer, that we've not selected you because you're our beloved colleague on this podcast, in order to get your bottle of Ben Lomond gin, you now have to sing the song and post that on the WhatsApp group, okay? As soon as you've done that, I will arrange a bottle of Ben Lomond gin to be headed to your house. So over to you, Mick McGovern. That's your penance for putting in the song. You're going to have to sing it, my man.
Very good. Thanks for that, Tony. Great little game. I think we'll enjoy a few more of them coming out over the next few weeks to pick us up on a Sunday morning. So that's your task for Sunday morning, game day mornings now, is to come up with engagement games that we can all play. So right, let's see out the rest of this podcast. And I'm kind of inclined to say we really don't need to touch that long on the Cowboys preview, given that it's the return game. They're coming into the link. We know roughly what the Cowboys are since we last saw them. They've had a little bit of a revival. They just refuse to die, even though you probably think that they're better off fading away and trying to get a high draft pick. But Joe Jones, in typical fashion, doesn't really know what he should be doing, just does whatever he wants, which we love. So it's kind of hard to pin this one. They've not got anything to play for. They are eliminated from the playoffs. So they are literally in no man's land now, and they've had a couple of wins to sort of hurt their draft capital. So it's hard to place this. Obviously, we've still got Cooper Rush at quarterback. A few games under his belt. I think when he's coming before, he gets better as you go along. So he's definitely going to be a more improved player than what we faced in Dallas. We're not going to have the sunshine coming in as well, which is going to be another plus, I suppose, for both teams. But it still feels like we should have too much, providing Hurts does come back from his concussion, even maybe without it, with a week's worth of prep, maybe we could game plan enough to compensate for Pickett's weaknesses. but without going into too much detail, because I think we've done that to death. Give me your overall thoughts on the game going into it. A couple of points on how you think the game's going to go, and if you fancy a prediction.
I think you're right, Phil. Everyone that listens to this podcast knows who the Dallas Cowboys are. They know the threats. They know that they've got CeeDee Lamb. They know that they've got a run game that's beginning to find its feet. They know that they've got other targets in Tolbert and Jake Ferguson. They also know that they've got Micah Parsons on defence. So there are threats there, and they're beginning to find their rhythm with Cooper Rush under centre. So it's probably a different game than we thought it was going to be 2 or 3 weeks ago, which in itself is hilarious because, as you rightly say, it's harming their draft picks every single time that they win a game, and they've got nothing to play for now. Apart from a bit of pride, and I don't think we'll ever see a Cowboys team or an Eagles team if the shoe was on the other foot lying down to our fiercest of rivals. So it'll be a tough game at the Link. Of course, the game's been flexed. It's come out of the 9:25 kickoff and into the 1 p.m. kickoff now. So for those of us who have prior engagements on Sunday afternoon, it's my mum's 80th birthday on Sunday, God love her. So this could well be the first game that I miss in a decade. So I'm kind of hoping that it's going to be a good one. And I'm hoping that Jalen plays and we come out on top. And by the time that we're heading into the fourth quarter, that rest period, that bye week, that Falls bye week can begin before we hit the wild card, and we can begin resting some of our key players, some of whom we've spoken about on the pod tonight. In terms of predictions, Phil, I lost my streak. I was on a 6-game against the spread win streak. The Eagles are understandably going to be favourites. I've not had a look at the line yet. Have you had a look at the line yet, Phil, on the spread? Whilst Phil's looking that up, I'm going to take a money line bet this weekend, and that would be that the Eagles will get home and hosed. Jalen Hurts will take the field, and we will be NFC East champions by 9:30 p.m. our time on Sunday night. What's your thoughts, Phil? What are you going to do? Mute.
Thank you. I was too busy looking down, trying not to make stupid huffing noises as I was thumbing my way through my phone. We're currently 9.5 point favourite, to have the Cowboys, which feels high, probably just the recency bias. So when you're coming off a defeat, you're always a bit nervous about the line the next week. But to be honest, it's probably true. I think that's obviously expecting Hurts to be coming back. I think that line will definitely move closer if Hurts continues to not practice throughout the week. So I reckon that will probably end up being a lot closer as the week goes on. But like I said, it makes me a little bit nervous. I feel like it always is the way when you get punched in the mouth a little bit to come back and be back to how you were before that situation occurred. And I think that we're going to go into the game, and again, it's because of all the multitude of things, and one of them being the referees as well. We're sort of looking at, as long as we get a good officiating crew, it should be a relatively comfortable afternoon, because it feels like that's the only times when they make the games close for us and we end up getting in our own way because we're battling with the refs and the other team. So, but I think we should have way more than enough on defense, providing everyone's coming in fit to get after Cooper Rush. Their offensive line is a bit banged up. They've got plenty of people on IR, but as always, they've got CeeDee Lamb, they've got Jake Ferguson and Brandon Cooks in the receiving core, and they're always going to be an absolutely huge threat. So they're not to be. I never want to dismiss them, and I do definitely don't want to take them for granted, like maybe we did with the Washington Commanders. But this game is definitely going to be one of the games where we're going to need to get the 2 seed locked up, the East locked up. No, don't take anything for granted. Hit them hard. Take them to the sword. Win it. Then give yourself a week off. There is no other scenario that is acceptable in this situation. There is no, like last season, yeah, we lost to these, but if we do this next week, yeah, we lost to these, but we do that the following week, and then limping into the off season, that the fans won't accept that. The players are too good for that, and the team is too good for that. So this Sunday, one way or another, is going to be electric, and I'm hoping that the players come out on top. So I'm not making a prediction either, because I just feel like we're too early in the week. We don't know the injury status. We don't know what's going on. So even the spread is far too big for right now. I think it's going to be an Eagles win, though. I just can't see us not beating the Cowboys at home, given everything that's at stake.
I think there are doubts about Jalen Hurts if you're getting 9.5 points on Dallas.
Vegas
again,
knows.
If I was a gambler, yeah, Vegas does know. But these long shots, these big dogs haven't been getting home this season. So you just have to look at the Buffalo Bills last night, where they were taken close to the wire by the Patriots. So I think I would be putting money on Dallas +9 this weekend, but we'll still bring it home. We're going to be the East champions by Sunday night, confident in that.
Yeah, I generally was having the same thought, like get on the spread while it's quite large, and then if it ends up getting, in the worst case scenario that Hurts isn't playing this weekend, at least you probably got a good chance of that bet coming out. But we don't talk like that much.
We don't.
We're positive normally. So that's the game in a nutshell. Thanks for joining with us to listen to a losing pod, the first in almost 3 months. So we have to remind ourselves that it's not very often we've had to do this. We've gotten through it. We've discussed the points. You guys have made some fantastic points about there being such a multitude of things that, it's almost impossible to look at this game and go, the Eagles were bad. There were so many other factors. So you can kind of sweep this one under the carpet a little bit, move on to next week. It all rests on Jalen Hurts' shoulders, as always, much to Liam's delight. But for now, let's enjoy our Christmas with our families, friends, Eagles fans across the world. We wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We will be back to review the Cowboys game. Can't tell you when that's going to be, because there are a lot of factors in the way, my personal circumstances included, but we will desperately try to get something out to you, even if it's just Tony sat talking to himself for half an hour. I'm sure we'll get something out to you. Tony with his semi under the table. But like I said, thanks very much for sticking with us this year. We've had such a great year, giving you guys some great swag from fantasy prizes, the gin and whiskey that Tony has been fantastic in allowing us the opportunity to have our own bottle and give them away. 40 bottles of the gin and 40 bottles of the whiskey this year, Tony. An unbelievable amount of generosity from you and your Loch Lomond and Ben Lomond. But on top of that, signed merchandise, we have update on the pod. I do have confirmation from someone within the Eagles that we will be getting some stuff sent over. So fantasy league people who are currently in the midst of tense finals on Sleeper, there will be some incredible swag coming your way. I can't tell you what it is yet, because even I don't know. But I think I might even do like an unboxing video. That's what people do these days. Get the box in, record myself opening up, record myself getting more and more depressed as I realise all this great stuff that I'm not going to get to ever keep. Because last year, sending on the signed Devontae Smith jersey was excruciating. But anyway, we got all that to look forward to this year. Thanks for sticking with us this year and the support that you've given. We've grown exponentially, and we've got fantastic plans going into next year with the Philly Sports International side of things. Big things in 2025. Thanks very much for your support in 2024. And go Birds.
Fly Eagles, fly.